Welcome to the Vantage HR Influencers Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Vantage Circle, the simple and AI-powered rewards and recognition platform for employee engagement.
Hourly workers are the unsung heroes of many industries. They keep things running smoothly. But attracting and engaging them can be as difficult as finding a unicorn in a haystack. With the gig economy on the rise and competition for talent fiercer than ever, businesses need to step up their game if they want to attract and retain top-notch hourly workers. So in this episode, let's take a journey into discovering the secrets to attracting the best of the best hourly workers and keeping them engaged. Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Vantage Influencers Podcast, where we explore a wide range of HR topics that are sure to grab your attention and inspire you. I'm your host, Sanjeevani Saikia, and today we will be having a conversation on attracting and engaging hourly workers. And for the same, I have with me Shari Simpson, Senior Manager, Thought Leadership, Palo City. Hi, Shari.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. How are you?
I'm wonderful. It's a beautiful day here in Chicagoland in the U.S. Hopefully you'll hear maybe some birds in my background today.
Unfortunately, I can't hear them, but I'm sure it must be lovely. First of all, I would like to thank you for giving your invaluable time and joining us in today's episode. Before we dive deeper into today's topic, attracting and engaging hourly workers, could you kindly walk us through your corporate journey so far?
Yeah, I think like most HR professionals, I didn't start off in HR. My undergrad is actually in adolescent studies, and I started my career in mental health, actually working with adolescent teenagers who were wards of the state. Had the world's best boss, and he pulled me aside one day and said, "You're in the wrong profession. I think you should go work in HR." And I was completely shocked by that. I was like, "You want me to go be the policy police? That's not my jam." And, he sat me down. He had a really great conversation around my skill set and what he thought I could accomplish. And I had a lot of faith and psychological safety with him. And so I took that leap into HR, and that was about 16 years ago and haven't looked back. So since then, I've done a variety of roles. I've worked in learning and development, payroll and benefits, employee relations, talent acquisition, and really covered a variety of industries in that time: local government, manufacturing, real estate, and finally where I am now in the tech space. And having worked with both union and non-union environments, I feel like I've kind of become the jack of all trades when it comes to things in HR.
So that's really wonderful, Shari. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. You've surely gained a lot of valuable insights along the way, and we are so grateful to have you in our episode today.
Oh, thank you.
So now we can dive straight into the topic. When it comes to attracting and retaining hourly workers, it's important to understand what factors are most important to them when they're evaluating potential employers. After all, if you want to attract top talent and keep them engaged and motivated, you need to know what matters most to them. So, Shari, what are some of the most important factors that hourly workers consider when evaluating potential employers? Also, could you kindly highlight some of the misconceptions about hourly workers?
Yeah, so I think most hourly workers are looking for some of the same things that salary workers look for, but with a little bit of a different flavor. So when they think about hours worked, right? Is it a full-time opportunity? Is it a part-time opportunity? That can really influence whether they think a job is right for them or not, depending upon their season of life. I think a lot about working moms right now who are trying to balance, raising children and working, and sometimes being an hourly employee is such a benefit for them.
Correct.
The other thing I would say is they look at what are the benefits being offered? Are those benefits geared towards just salaried employees, or are they benefits that are geared towards hourly workers? And I think we can dig into that a little bit more. I think we will cover that a little bit more, but I think what you think about your benefits offering is a big impact. The other thing is paid time off. What does that look like for your hourly employees? Are the accrual rates an incentive for them to join your organization? How do you think about potentially flexibility when it comes to paid time off? And then the other big one is advancement. With Gen Z entering the workforce and influencing how we have to think of employees differently, one of their biggest requests is, how do I advance? How do I move to that next level? And so during that interview process, they're looking for those opportunities.
Correct.
Something else that's come up recently that I've seen is some of the social impact organizations are having that hourly workers are concerned about. Things like, what's your carbon footprint? How did you handle the pandemic?
Yes.
A lot of this has changed because of how we looked at essential workers during the pandemic. So things are different now than they were a couple of years ago when it comes to what hourly employees want. And then there's misconceptions, right? I want to go to that question. I think sometimes we think of hourly workers, or I've heard this, I don't think this, but I've heard this, that they could be unreliable, that they're expendable, that they're somehow are lower on the hierarchy of a career than salaried employees.
Yes.
And it's just not true. Just because you're an hourly employee doesn't mean you are any less valuable to an organization, that you bring any less of a skill set to the table. And so I think as you think about attracting and retaining them, you have to hit all of those things, but you also have to think outside the box a little bit differently. Are you engaging in programs in high school level here in the States where you are developing that relationship so you can grab kids who are coming right out of high school? Are you tapping into maybe untapped talent, things like prison programs or programs for felons who are reentering the workforce? All of those things are a great place to think about or rethink about how we're defining hourly workers.
Yeah. As you've mentioned that, people have this tendency to assume that hourly workers are, they're not very much focused in their career. So where does this come from? Where does this perception come from, basically?
Yeah, I think it comes from this idea, and I think it's an old idea, and I thankfully think it's changing.
Yeah.
But this idea that if you can't get a salaried position, if you don't have that level of autonomy in your thinking or in your role, then somehow you're less. And I keep going back to how we thought about essential workers in the pandemic. That hourly population have our world running, it's great to have knowledge workers in those salary slots, but when the rubber meets the road, those hourly workers brought us through. And so let's start redefining how we think of them.
Absolutely. Yes. Makes a lot of sense. Here, I would like to ask you, what are some of the innovative strategies employers can use to engage and retain hourly workers?
Oh, yeah. I love this question. I think this is where the sky's the limit when it comes to thinking about this generation. What I mean is Gen Z and then hourly workers as well. Because I think what Gen Z is doing is they're pushing us to think differently. And I think that's influencing how we think about hourly workers as well.
Correct.
It's having a huge impact there. So the first thing I would say is recognition. How are you thinking about recognizing your hourly workers? A lot of salaried employees have opportunities like restricted stock units or bonus programs or those kinds of things where hourly workers may not have that. So are you providing opportunity to recognize them publicly? Is your CEO talking about the impact that those employees have on the bottom line, on serving their clients or their customers? I think that's a big thing when it comes to hourly workers, that they can feel seen and heard in their organizations. The next thing is flexibility. Flexibility is something that everybody wants right now. Yeah. And it used to be like, hey, I can work remote one day. That's just not cutting it anymore. Flexibility means I get to choose where I work, when I work, how I work, who I work with, maybe even what tech I get to use. So how do you infuse flexibility into your hourly workforce? And if you're listening and you're like, yeah, okay, we're a manufacturing environment, there's not a lot of flexibility I can have on a manufacturing floor, you got to be creative. Flexibility might not be you can have them flex their schedule. Maybe flexibility means that you can put in their hands their ability to manage their own shift swapping. Maybe it means that you survey that hourly population more often to decide what benefit offerings you're going to get. So it's really changing that definition of flexibility when we think of that hourly population. And the last thing I would say is what's in it for them, right? The WIFM. Everybody wants this. And so when you think about hourly workers, you have to put on that employee experience hat for them as well and think about their environment. What is the tech that you're giving them to use to do their jobs?
Yes.
How do they engage in different kind of policies? And do you make it easy for them? Those are the big things I think some of them are considering.
Yeah, true. I feel you have shared some key ways. We already agree with the fact that hourly workers are a vital part of the workforce and play a crucial role in driving productivity. However, at times they may feel undervalued and unmotivated due to the lack of recognition and rewards for their contributions. So it would be great if you could suggest some ways on how employers can create a culture of recognition and reward that motivates hourly workers to perform at their very best.
Yeah. So I would start with this. What you allow, you approve. And what I mean by that is the culture that you're creating in your hourly workforce. Are you incentivizing and recognizing the culture and behaviors that you want? Or are you kind of ignoring the bad behaviors and just focusing on KPI? I think that is really important when you think about this population is how are you rewarding? And so with that being said, you cannot take a peanut butter approach where you just spread the same kind of recognition across every position and every person. And so some of the things that I think you really need to lean into is, again, that company-wide recognition program. How does that look for your hourly workforce, especially leaning into peer recognition? So do you have a mechanism or a tool where peers can recognize each other on the great work they're doing? Because oftentimes a CEO or a C-suite might not see the impact one hourly worker is having. So I would say start there. The second thing is start to get really creative about programs that are unique to the hourly population. So one of the things that I've seen recently is tuition repayment programs. So we used to talk really about tuition reimbursement, right? You could qualify to submit your receipts. Now we're talking about tuition repayment, right? So you come into an organization out of college and you've got all this student loan debt. And if you see a company that's going to help you take care of that burden, you're helping to meet some of that hourly workers, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You're helping them meet that need. And so how do you think about that? And it's just one example, but how do you think of the things that are really going to be impactful to that population's needs? The next thing I would say is, how do we give them a clear path to promotion? That's one of the things that in general in the HR space, I still think we struggle with. I was thinking about this the other day when it comes to performance reviews. Everybody's chasing that, outstanding or exceeding whatever your highest level of performance is.
Yes.
But we haven't taught managers how to articulate how an employee actually gets there. You don't have the conversation with your manager that says, okay, if I see this out of you in the next year, you're going to be meets expectations. If I see this, you'll be exceeding. And if I see this, you'll be outstanding. So let's get really clear about what those paths to promotion look like, and advancement opportunities for our hourly employees. And then the last thing, make it fun. I think sometimes we just get stuck on a very corporate view of what fun looks like. But let's think about fun and let's think about, what's unique to your culture. Forced fun isn't fun for anybody. So, what does your culture look like and what can it hold from creating that funness in the workplace?
Shari, you must have witnessed the labor market constantly evolving and changing. From digital tools to new strategies, there are promising trends and innovations that are emerging. And I think it's important for employers to know these trends to unlock the full potential of their hourly workers. So, Shari, could you share some promising trends and innovations in hourly workforce management that both employers and employees should be aware of?
Yeah, I think, what we're seeing in the tech space is really interesting. We're putting more and more autonomy onto the employee to manage their work. And so I talked a little bit earlier about shift swapping. But if you think about shift scheduling software, you can create parameters now where you can put the onus back on the employee to kind of manage their own schedules, right? Work within the parameters that the organization set, but give them the autonomy and the flexibility to do that. I think that's really fascinating. I think, the more we can put on our employees to take ownership of their careers, the more invested they're going to feel.
True.
Second thing is employee experience. For so long, this has kind of been labeled as culture or different things like that. But I think we have to change our mindset and think about now, what are the experiences that we're going to curate for these employees? And it's just the same as a customer, right? We spend a lot of time thinking about customer experience. It's the same thing we should be thinking about for employee experience. Next, I would say gig economy. So we've seen these in things like Uber, TaskRabbit, Instacart, those types of things. But how do we bring that methodology into our workforce? And I absolutely love this idea because a lot of people are multi-passionate, multi-talented, and just because they're in an hourly role doing task A doesn't mean that they don't have this robust skill set that could help us in other parts of the organization. Correct. So how do we rethink jobs and move away from job descriptions to families of job skills? If you have a job skills family that certain roles have, you can tap talent in a different way and really be innovative on how you're using your hourly workforce.
Correct.
The next thing I would say would be, how do you think about the hourly population and remote work? And this one has always been very complicated because we do need some roles just need to be in person, but we also need to be innovative. And I'll give an example here. So McDonald's has recently been testing hiring hourly workers who work remote from home and are taking orders via a video chat or a video feature with the person in the drive-thru, right? Mm-hmm. So now you've given the ability for an hourly worker working in, fast food to be remote. I just think that's so innovative and so creative.
It's very interesting.
Yeah. And, McDonald's has always been kind of on the forefront. I remember talking about this back in 2019. They actually were allowing employees or candidates to apply for jobs using Amazon Alexa. Right? You could sit in your living room, have a conversation with Amazon Alexa and apply for a job. Really, really innovative. The last thing I would say is on-demand pay. Give people the ability to get paid whenever they want to get paid, not every 2 weeks. So there's a lot of software out there. A lot of different HCM organizations are doing this. And it just, again, it puts more autonomy in the hands of the employees and how they want to work and live their lives.
Shari, do you think the shift is more apparent post-pandemic, or was it there before, but either we didn't recognize it or we didn't get hold of it? What do you have to say?
I think the pandemic accelerated it. I don't think it was that it wasn't happening. I think that again, and I know I've talked a lot about Gen Z, but I think they are pushing us to think differently. And we've started to see some of that change. So I'll give you one example. For so long, we talked about career progression as a ladder, right? You're climbing the corporate ladder. You're going to hit. Yeah. We don't talk about it that way anymore. We talk about careers as lattices, right? You might take 2 rungs up. You might take a lateral. You might go down 2 steps because we're now talking about skill sets.
Skill sets, true. So here I feel our listeners, especially the hourly workers, as well as the employers, would be very interested to know the role that retirement plans, health insurance, or paid time off play in attracting this section of workers. I'm sure these factors have the potential to impact decisions. Shari, what's your take on how can employers design benefit packages that meet the needs of hourly workers?
So start with the basics, right? Retirement plans, healthcare, those are check the boxes. So get those right. Look at your competition in your area and decide what are the check the boxes you need in that area. and then level them up. So, and what I mean by that is, there's this big push for mental health support now for employers to provide to employees. So can you offer something like a Calm app or a subscription to Headspace where it's really unique, it's part of your benefits offering, and it goes along with supporting employees? I think sometimes we get stuck in all the check the box stuff and don't really realize that we can design these really amazing, robust benefit programs that get to the heart of what we want to do for our employees. I'll give an example. One of the things that we ran into is we have a very large population that loves animals. And so offering pet insurance is a benefit to us. That's something that can attract talent. And it doesn't seem like it should, right?
Yes.
If you're thinking about that, but it does, right? Because you're communicating something about your culture and your values in what that benefit package looks like. Yeah. So that's what I would say for retirement health. Second thing is paid time off, right? Take a human approach to paid time off. There's all this chatter out there around unlimited time off. And I think the data shows that if you have unlimited time off, you actually don't take as much time as you need. So have robust time off programs, but be realistic about it. Something that I continue to see in the hourly population that just frankly hurts my heart is this idea of punishing employees for using benefits given to them. So what I mean by that is, let's say you have a sick time policy that allows your employees to take 10 days off a year. That's a lot, but let's say that's what it is.
Exactly.
But also you have an attendance policy, and your attendance policy says, if you miss X number of days, then, you are in danger of discipline. And what I have seen is that those sick days count against that attendance program. And it communicates something about your culture. It's, in my opinion, wholly unfair. If you have a benefit of sick time and you're using it, you shouldn't also get punished for it. So we need to rethink about paid time off for employees. And then the last thing I would say is get really creative about employee discounts. Maybe your organization has a really cool product. Give your employees discounts to access that product. Make them your brand advocates, and help them get invested that way when you think about your benefits offerings.
Correct. I agree with your take. Shari, is there any particular problem that employers face when it comes to attracting and engaging hourly workers? And also, please share your view on how that particular problem can be resolved.
Yeah, I think one of the things is, why is the role at your organization better than any other role out there? Like we talked about earlier, the culture shift when it came to the pandemic, and we saw this pendulum, right? So we became very employee centric right around late 2020, early 2021, where we started to hear the terms like the Great Resignation and the Great Regret and the Great Reshuffle, right? We love our catchphrases.
True.
And now the pendulum is swinging back to the side of the employer, right? And we have some more autonomy and say in the types of workers that we're collecting, but essential workers will remain. And so how do you start to link the impact that those workers have to the bottom line? So give you an example of what I mean. So our organization is an HCM, and an arm of our organization produces payroll checks that will be sent out to our clients to pay their employees, right? Yeah. So we have an entire team that works in the office and prints checks. And you would think, okay, that's not that impactful of a role. But really, that could be the most impactful role in our organization, right? Absolutely. If those checks don't go out the door, they don't get to our clients in time, we're going to end up in the news. That's just frankly how it works. And so start connecting the dots for your hourly employees on the impact that they can have for your business. Next, again, think about growth. Be clear on how you grow in an organization. And not everybody wants to get promoted. Some people just want to get really, really deep in their role. So think about how you can provide those learning and development opportunities for both types of people so that you're not just targeting your high potentials, your high performers, because they might not want to climb the corporate ladder. And then the last is communication. Get them connected, get them really excited to be in your organization and working with each other. And this is where I think you leverage your technology. If you have an HCM that has built-in peer-to-peer communication or groups, or if you're using, other resources, use those to get excited. We had a client who was struggling with this hourly population. They weren't sure how to get their employees connected and communicating. And what they found is one of their employees was encouraged to do it, went ahead and posted the big fish that he had caught on a trip that he had done over the weekend. And it started this internal competition / communication around fishing and the best tactics. And it created community and it created stickiness, and it reaffirmed for those hourly employees, I want to be here. Not only am I getting career and advancement, but I'm getting connection and communication as well.
Connections and communications. Yes. I think that community part is very important for so many individuals in the organizations.
Yeah.
So, Shari, we are arriving at the end of today's episode. But before we let you go, there's one last question that both our listeners and I would love to know your take on. While employers play a significant role in creating a positive and productive work environment, hourly workers also have an essential part to play in shaping the workplace culture. With that in mind, I would like to explore how hourly workers themselves can contribute to fostering a more positive and productive work environment.
Yeah, I love this question. And the reason I love it is because we're talking about hourly workers and their impact to the business, because it's so huge. So if you're an hourly worker and you're listening, I would say start here. Get the basics right. Attitude, punctuality, reliability, right? You want to check the box on those kinds of things because you're going to be evaluated on those, at the most basic level for your performance. So get those right. Second thing I say, think about how you're communicating, not only with your peers, but with management, and be curious. I always encourage people to think about asking questions, because you can't get a no or you can't get a yes unless you ask the question. So be curious. Hey, I'd really love to learn more about X. Can I sit in on a meeting? Or can you walk me through that? Or is there somebody in the organization that is doing something really creative or you admire and they'd be a great mentor, right? You are uniquely positioned to be able to ask those really curious questions. And then the last thing I would say is take initiative. Often hourly workers are uniquely positioned to see things in the organization that your upper level management can't see. So bring to the table like, hey, I've noticed X, and I really think if we implement these 3 changes, we could have a huge impact on our customer experience, our productivity, our business goals. Just because you're an hourly worker shouldn't exclude you from thinking with that business mindset. So don't sell yourself short. Come to the table with those initiatives and those ideas.
Correct. That's a very important point that you've highlighted. We have reached at the end of today's podcast. Also, our audience might want to stay in touch with you post this podcast. After all, you have enriched each one of us. So it would be great if you could tell them how they can reach out to you.
Yeah, I would love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always growing my network there. You can find me under Shari Simpson. I also host my own podcast, actually. It's called HR Mixtape. And it's for HR and business professionals. And we do a lot of serious content, but we also do a lot of fun content like answering questions from Reddit and or linking leadership concepts to current trending TV shows, those kinds of things. So really happy to have been here and look forward to connecting with this audience further.
Great. Shari, it's been a pleasure to have you as our guest today. Your insights have been invaluable, and we are grateful for the time you have taken to share your knowledge with our listeners. So thank you so much, Shari, for being there.
This was wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for listening to the Vantage HR Influencers Podcast. Please do subscribe to Vantage HR Influencers Podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and our YouTube channel for new episodes.